What's up YouTube? My name's Quickie, welcome back to the channel. Hope you all had a good Christmas. Ours was blinded. It was really good. It's actually quite a quiet affair. We just had Sam's dad over. You couldn't say the same thing on Boxing Day. It was crazy. I've eaten so much turkey and gammon. It is unbelievable. Anyway, it is now the 29th. I know that because it was emailed to me. I had my jabs today. So I'm back in the shop doing a few bits and pieces because apparently I'm going to feel crook as hell and my whole arm's going to go dead. I've had my left one done because my right arm does all my favourite things. So anyway, I'm in here. I've got the, there's a couple of bits that I need to make, hence the tube and the tube bender, Isaac. And basically I need to make a bender gauge and a cheater for the two dies that I'm going to be using. So this is my new one. It's very heavy. And this is the one that I had previously where I was doing the, having a go at doing the header pipes. That didn't work out so well because it was stainless. And there is like a couple of little, you can see the guff marks on it where it was rubbing. But yeah, I need to get these done so I can work out all my angles and everything else on the frame. So depending on how much time I get on this, I might be taking the angle grinder to that now because I've figured out my plan. I know what I'm going to do. So we might be chopping big bits off the frame. It just depends how I go basically. But first up, I need to make these gauges. Although I've used this die before, I've never used it with this material. And basically I need to have a cheater and a bend gauge for the, any materials that I shove in this. It's only going to take one diameter, but if it was a different material or a different wall thickness or a different type of pipe, like this is ERW, you can see the seam in it. Anything different, I always do one of these cheaters and bend gauges. So, if this isn't your sort of thing, please feel free to skip this video and come back later. Please come back later. But this, I'm walking you through absolutely everything I'm doing with this. Always have done. I ain't going to change it. I'm in here working, so I'm filming it. So, right, a few explanations then. Right then, so some of you that have been watching the channel for a while will know that I've done a thing on tube bending before. I have. However, apparently I did a rubbish job at it. There was loads of questions and loads of suggestions. Oh, you could have done this, or you should know this, and blah, blah. I know most of that stuff because I'm not new to this. I'm new to making bike frames, but I have been bending tube for a little bit. So what I wanted to do is to cover, some of the basics and how I do it, and the reason why I do it that way, and I'll give you all the close-ups and the explanations and all that sort of stuff, just so you get the gist. There is probably going to be stuff that I miss out of this, but this isn't a tutorial. All I'm trying to do is explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it that way, and the stuff that I'm trying to bear in mind whilst I'm doing the other two things that I just said. Does that make sense? I think it does. Anyway, so this, I hope you get it though, this isn't a tutorial, this is just an explanation. I may have some stuff wrong. If I have, chip in obviously because I want to get it right. However, like I say, I have been doing it for a little bit, so it is what it is. Right, let me give you a look at this thing so you can see the tool that I'm using. Right, so this is a tube bender I'm using. It's a tube bender, not a pipe bender. We'll get to the differences in a minute, but this is a tube bender. It's meant for bending tube. It's a JD Squared Model 3 tube manual tube bender. I got this for about 350 quid. I think they're still about the same sort of price. I got mine from, I get all this stuff from either Stakesy's or Tubella. The dies that I recently got came from Tubella, but they're the two people that seem to do them in the UK. Depending on where you are, I don't know, but you'll find it. It's a really simple thing actually. So I've recently bought a die. This is the old one. This is the one that was used to do the headers. When I was trying to do the exhaust system out of stainless, that didn't work out very well just because I'm asking it to go around too tight of a bend. But this is the die that I used to do that. Now, you might think I don't need a cheater or a bend gauge because I've already used it. However, This is the reason. It's the tube that I'm using. I've never bent that tube around that die. This is mild steel ERW. You can see it's 1.5 inch OD, 2 mil wall thickness, and it's never gone around that die. So I don't know, one, how it's going to bend, two, how much material is going to be used in the bend, and I also don't have a cheater for it. So that's where you're comparing angles and bend points and all that other sort of stuff. We'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, because I haven't put that tube around here, I need to make one. Whenever I get a new die for a job or whatever, I always do this, because it's a really good little reference tool to have, and I'll show you why later on. Pipe and tube, different things. Right, so pipe and tube is two very different things, although they do look remarkably similar, it has to be said. We are playing about with tube today, and I'm bending it in a tube bender. I'm not bending pipe in a pipe bender. They're different, they're very different. So this is a tube bender. I will get a picture of a pipe bender and I'll stick it up just so you can see the difference. Right, this one is different as well, in that you basically hanging hold of one end of the tube, because that all goes through there, you'll see in a minute, gets clamped on here, and then this bit basically draws it around the die with a follower clamping it in place to help keep any deformation, right? Pipe bender is different. A lot of them seem to, I mean, I know you get different versions of stuff, but the picture that I showed you, that's one where it's like you get one of these dies or a similar one which is shaped like that, and it basically pushes in the middle of the bend and you clamp the two ends. There's loads of videos out there about pipe bending, go and have a look basically. Some of them just have a running guide that sits on the outside, it's a bit like a hook, a bit like that. And that's bolted down to something, you haven't got that bit, and it just basically keeps it in tow as it goes around. There's all different sorts, but we are mucking about with tube, not pipe, so I'm using this. Tube is defined by its outside diameter, so that bit around the outside, not the inside, okay? And then you've got things like the wall thickness, the material it's made out of, is it drawn over mandrel or is it ERW, which is basically welded like this, all that sort of stuff. The important bits to get is the outside diameter, right, and wall thickness, and obviously the stuff that it's made out of. And tube is used mostly for structural stuff like bike frames. Pipe, on the other hand, basically transport something from A to B, right? And when you're making all this stuff or designing it, you need to know how much stuff you can squash through that pipe and have come out the other end. So it's the inside diameter which is the important bit, because you're only ever going to get, even under pressure, you're only going to get X amount that goes through it. So you figure out the pressure and what it is you're trying to transport, you can figure out how much you can shift. Tube, you don't really give a monkeys. There's nothing going through it apart from fresh air. So that's the difference, all right? So get it in your head. If you're bending tube, try and use a tube bender. You can do it with pipe, with a pipe bender, but it's not designed to bend that, basically. It's way better than other methods involving heat and formers. But it's, if you use the right tool for the job, be it pipe bending or tube bending, then you'll get the least amount of deformation in the sidewalls as you possibly can do. And essentially you are going to be asking it to stretch a fair bit. And if you stretch tube going around a bend, you can just kink it without all this stuff. So, you do what you want to. I'm not your dad, but that's why I'm doing it this way. Right, so what am I going on about with cheaters and bend gauges and stuff? Right, the easy way of explaining it is this is the follower that goes with this die, all right? This is all clamped in that machine that you've just seen. So essentially, this tube would fit in there like that. Come on. That would go on the outside, and there's a clamp here which basically, you go there, and this clamp basically goes around, and there's a pin that drops in just to locate everything. Where is it? So that pin would go in there, and then you clamp this bolt into it. So that holds this end secure, right? Then what happens is the follower basically stays where it is. Actually, shall I shove it in? For now. And as you pull the handle on it, you're rotating the die. So this whole bit is going to move round. The follower basically stays where it is, and it's this bit, that bit that is pushing the tube into the die, and that's what causes the bend to start, basically. Okay, so on this manual tube bender, basically you need about 100mm of sticking out, because like if I wanted to have one bend, then a 50mm run, and then another bend, I couldn't really do it very well. Reason being is that you need to have about 100mm here to clamp it in place before the follower starts, and it's from that point, or just beyond that point, that the bend actually starts. Okay, and if you flip it round and do it, so you do one bend, then flip it round and hold on to the other end, you'll find that that bend won't sit right in the die and the follower, so you end up with like stupid curves and all sorts of stuff and kinking and blah blah blah. It just doesn't work. You have to have about 100mm gap between the bends. So if you need anything shorter, basically you're cutting the tube, you know, doing a sleeve to it, sticking it all together and welding it up. All right, so that's basically how they work. So when you're stretching a piece of tube around a die, you are stretching it. You're bending it around a centerline radius, so we'll use the weld here as an example. But when you're stretching it round the die, the outside wall is actually stretching. You would think it would compress the same amount on the other side. It doesn't. It is trying to compress it. And if you remember back from the other video where I was doing it with stainless, all the inside got rippled up and everything else, because you really can't compress it, and the metal's got to go somewhere, so it just turns into kinks. So there is a minimum centerline radius that you can go for with tube, and normally, obviously depending on wall thickness and stuff like that, but normally the minimal centerline radius you can go with is 3 times the diameter of the tube that you're trying to bend, right? Okay, so what is a bend gauge and a cheater going to do? Well, essentially all I'm going to do is mark this tube up with increments at certain points and blah blah blah, and then we're going to shove it in the tube bender and bend it, and then those marks suddenly become a reference for me for the future, basically. So if we was to set this to, oh, you're already on 100, right? Okay, so that's set on 100. We know that we need 100mm just to clamp it into the die. So 100. Well, actually, let's do it on the weld. So there's 100mm. Okay. So that is our start point. So when the follower engages up to this in the machine, essentially that start point is going to be right on this leading edge, right on this face. Okay. So as I start pulling this round the die, the bend isn't going to start exactly there. It's always going to be a little bit beyond it. We'll get to that in a bit. But what I want to know is how much material is going to be needed to do any bend. Let me get the other rule. Hang on. So all I'm going to do is mark it. We will do every, I don't know, what should we do? Do every 10mm, so 10, 20, 30. Right, so that's done. I have gone up to, where have I gone up to? 250. No idea how much we're going to need. It ain't going to be that much, so I've definitely got something left over. So now all I'm going to do is put a little mark that ain't going to get rubbed off on each of those. You could scribe it, you know, whatever, but you want something that ain't going to get rubbed off as it gets pulled through the machine. So what I tend to do is just with a scribe, I marked all these with the centre of the line on the 10 on the 10 mil increment. So in the centre of each of these lines, I'm just going to put a scratch. It's just I know that that ain't gonna go anywhere then. This doesn't need to be massively exact, but it's nice to get it where you want it. Where's the other follower that I had? Because that might be different. Right, so this one, which again is 1.5", 4.5 centerline radius, which is the one that goes with this actual die, sits in hole 5, which is a lot closer. So you can go in hole 5. Which way up? That way. Like that. That puts the follower a lot closer to the die. So with a little bit of luck, he'll slide in there. Get him somewhere close. And I want all my marks at the top. I will try and get a picture of this, although quite how easy it's going to be I don't know. So it's going to be about there. And the clamp can go on. Drop the locking pin in. He says, drop the locking pin in. Why aren't you going in? There we go. We can do up the pinch bolt. So now the idea is that you put a little bit of preload on it and you'll see it stops, because obviously the piece of tube is now sandwiched between the die and the follower. And when you've got to that point, you basically want that start line that we had on that leading edge of the follower. Where are we? A bit more. Going to be about there, like that. All my marks is directly on top, and the seam on the tube is going in the gap between the die and the follower. So that's all right, that will do there. So we nip him up. Excuse me. You're not wrenching down on that, it is just a little nip, basically. Let's double check it again. Yeah, we're on the money. Right, so now we can get to bending stuff. So we need to know that that's a starting point. So we move the degree indicator around and tighten that up. So our pointer is smack on 0. Like that, when viewed directly down from top. And then all I'm going to do is bend this up to 10 degrees, and then I'm going to mark the tube again with my Sharpie, which I'll also need. And that's all we're going to do. We're going to bend it 10 degrees. There will be a little bit of spring back, so as you get to 10 degrees on here, you then let the pressure off, you'll find that the pointer moves back again. So you keep nipping it up and up and up until when you let go, the pointer is on your 10 degree marker, and then that's where you mark it. And then you go up to 20 degrees, same thing again, 30, 40, 50, all the way around to 90 basically. That's all we're doing. All right, I'll get that done. Right then, so that's all done. I find it's easier just to extend the arm on this, just so you get a bit more leverage, because that way you can tweak it just a little bit by a little bit. So we should be able to take all this lot out and have a look at what we got. Ooh. Come on. Right, there we go. So that's what you end up with. Right, so here, if I just, that's obviously the starting point, and then we marked off 10mm increments, which I scratched. Now everything's all bent up, we'll probably go around with a Dremel just to make sure that these are sort of a bit more visible. There we go. Okay, where are you? Can you see? I'm not sure you can, but anyway, this line here was marked on the follower at 10 degrees, then 20 degrees, 30 degrees, so on and so forth. 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 degrees, and these 10mm increments is basically how much material is going around the die for any one of those given bends. So let's say I wanted to do a 45 degree bend. 45 is basically halfway between the two, so from my starting point on the follower I would need 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80mm gets me up to the 40 mark. So that would be 90mm roughly of tube that I would need, you know, to account in my drawings or anything else that I'm doing to get a 45 degree bend. That's how much material is actually used in that bend. The other thing is, if you get a straight edge and have a proper close look at this, you'll see where the deformation starts and stops. You can see there's a little witness mark here just underneath where it says start. Try and get the light right. So that's where everything is basically engaging, whereas you can see that's a bit down below from where the start marker actually onto the follower. So on this material, basically it is going to start bending about 5mm after the follower. Bends 5mm. And they're basically all the things that you need to know in order to figure out how much material you need and where it's going to be and all that sort of stuff. And if you put a straight edge across here, you can see that although you've got the start line there, the bend does actually start about 5mm after it. So if you allow for that when you're chomping up your tube and measuring how much you're going to need to cut off in order to bend this one funky shape motorcycle frame side rail thing that I'm hoping to get done, all that sort of stuff comes in handy. It's not an exact science, but it definitely gets you in the ballpark. I'm hoping this makes sense. Right, so I'm going to shove the other die in, mark up another bit of tube. I'll permanently mark these as well, so I've got, you know, proper scratch lines and stuff, and then I've got my cheaters made.